and it's very, very easy to fix. So let's talk about the next season and what things need to change in order for this game to succeed. Well, obviously, there's a lot of things that have been notable this past season, a lot of changes, zones change every single week. We had a bunch of different things being annoying with the meta changing, things being broken, things being bugged, the ranked mode coming out that has had its fair bit of issues as well. So let's talk about what is required in my wish list and these few simple steps we can take in order to make this game the perfect state that it can be in order to improve it and make us all happy in the entire Fortnite community. Starting off with 3 different categories: ranked, meta mobility, and then tournament. So let's go into ranked first. Now, ranked needs to be one-to-one with competitive loot pools. Obviously, ranked is the Epic's way of basically showing off to pod players that, hey, you're able to visualize your elo. This is what you can do to progress in order to become a better player. But the issue is that the majority of players to where ranked actually matters, aka the competitive community, it doesn't really make much sense. We don't have the ability to host customs. We don't have the ability to play games at a level in which we're playing in tournaments. So there's a big mismatch here into what is broadcasted as competitive and what is actually competitive here in the ranked mode. So what we need to do is making ranked mode one-to-one with competitive loot pools so that the experience that you're playing in ranked is the experience that you play in actual Fortnite tournaments. Now, obviously, Epic's making the shift towards making ranked and competitive basically one-to-one as well, right? We had the introduction of cars and all the other stuff in the evaluation tournaments back in the day, but that's an issue that more than likely needs to be shifted towards something different in the future. Otherwise, we run into big issues, and performance related wise, we already know that all of those things aren't even possible. Going back to the second point was obviously being able to go back to hosting customs within the ranked game mode. Since we're going to assume that ranked is going to be changing for the better, well, then people need to practice for the better as well. And unfortunately, ranked isn't a great way to emulate tournament practice. It's not stacked. There's no way for it to be stacked unless there's very serious monetary incentives. And obviously that's never going to happen with the decreasing price pools that we've been having in the past few seasons, and actually, to be frank, the past few years of Fortnite. One of the things that need to be changed at its core in order to improve it just slightly, even though we don't put in money into it, is obviously the demotion out of Unreal. Specifically, you would want to have something like top 500 being capped at that amount of players so that you have the ability to be demoted out of Unreal, which, you know, sort of progresses people to play a little bit more safer, play the format a little bit better. And obviously, if that's the goal to get into Unreal, which, you know, it seemingly is for a lot of people, considering how popular ranked is, people want to improve their rank, especially towards the middle tiered players. Well, then this is one way to incentivize them, and maybe incentivize the big boy pros into doing that also. One other thing that would incentivize good gameplay within ranked, I hope it would be some sort of tournament incentive. We already know that ranked will be the way in order for you to play tournaments in the future. We saw this in the console cup. You have to be platinum to play it. However, it's not really that hard to get platinum, so maybe some sort of exclusivity towards the top of the leaderboard where players are invited to a monthly or bi-monthly tournament with a reset after each tournament, which basically incentivizes the rank grind every few months again, which be, you know, honestly one of the ways that all of these pros are going to be playing fully for late game, playing stat games and stuff like that. But obviously, one of the major concerns that you'd have is the queue times, right? Queue times would be excruciating long in those cases. So what you would need is the ability to queue up to creative or some sort of other casual game mode while you're queuing up for rank, similar to other games where you're able to play deathmatch or whatever in, and then you're able to queue up creative, play 1v1 maps, play warm-up maps, whatever, while you're waiting in queue. A very simple thing that Epic did say they were going to do at some point in the past, but still have failed to do so currently. And that would probably solve a lot of the people complaining about queue time issues and allows Epic to smooth and then close the gap in terms of queue times and the elo that you're playing at, which again, in case, would increase the amount of people playing for late game, making the games higher quality, making them more stacked. One small thing I would love to see is Champions Division for FNCS. Unreal, Champion, and Elite. Champion being only FNCS, I think will be a nice little goal in order to make those Diamond to Elite gains a little bit more stacked. towards the end of the season when people have to be playing for FTS and grinding for it. So then you'd have the top echelon being stacked now because of those private tournaments. You'd have the middle echelons being stacked because of those exclusive tournaments, aka FNCS as well. And then you have yourself a nice little ranked game mode where the games aren't going to be crazy stacked, but at least a little bit more than the 20 people alive I've been getting in my Unreal games. Not to flex. Symbol showing your progression and rank through each game I think is a no-brainer, similar to what Apex Legends has. Top right corner, every single time you gain a point, you rank up, or it shows you what the even or the break point is, so you know exactly, okay, if I get this much placement, I'll be able to break even on my points and then start gaining. Again, incentivizes people to play the correct format. What the format actually is, we don't really know, because I've tried getting a second place with 0 kills and I basically got 0 points for that, so maybe that needs to be improved upon slightly as well. But those are small things, I think, in order to make the ranked game mode a little bit better without investing too much into it from Epic's side. Now, moving over towards meta and mobility, obviously we had a lot of different meta changing items this season. We had katanas, ODMs, we have the Spider-Man now being introduced into the game, and there's one core issue I have with the majority of them, even though it doesn't apply to all of them, but infinite mobility, I think, is a major issue in Fortnite. Being able to rotate without a question, being able to rotate without having to think, I think is a major skill gap issue, and we want to increase the skill gap. We want to make it, the best players, the best do better. You don't want to be reliant on smaller things like just getting a katana and being able to rotate whatever zone you want, causes more issues, aka heal off again. So having infinite mobility being removed, I think, is one of the major points I'd love to see. So far, 2 seasons in a row, we'd have hammers and katanas being introduced. Infinite mobility, easy to rotate. Both haven't been the best of metas to play and watch personally, so maybe removing that and introducing other things like surfboards we saw in some of the leaks as well coming through, I think is a great thing, because surfboards are one of those things you have to try to keep safe. This is one of the reasons why I like cars a lot in Fortnite, because people with their cars have to be super safe and box it up, invest in materials, aka wasting mats, in order to save their car. And then when it comes towards late game, they're gonna have to leave that bad boy. But again, you have to take extra care to think about where you're positioning your vehicle. So something with a surfboard, I think, would be very good. Hopefully, if that is introduced. Launch pads, similarly, I think, are 50-50 on this, a little bit too RNG, but wouldn't be the worst compared to a katana. And I think the people's favorite, the people's champion, the bouncers will be #1 most loved item if it were to come back in the game. Because let's be honest, bouncers were one of the most competitive and most safe rotates in the game. You had to think about your layer, you had to think about where you wanted to rotate to. It was the perfect piece of mobility, and I think it is something that I personally miss a lot. I think that was one of the best duo seasons we've ever seen, was the bouncer meta. In terms of other shotguns for next season, obviously we had the drum gun that got leaked, but the issue with drum guns, as we saw in previous seasons, aka Primal season and other seasons with similar guns like the drum gun and not the drum shotgun, sorry, you need something to counteract them. Otherwise, you end up having a meta where people just jump in the boxes. Doesn't feel that skilled. So you need a counter shotgun in order to counteract the quickness of a drum shotgun. So for example, a high hitting shotgun, aka a pump, but not necessarily pump. Honestly, the Havoc would be fine here as well. Something that does 150 to 180 damage in total from your singular shot would be the best here. Having something like attack shotgun next season or something slow wouldn't be the best, because obviously you're going to be running into people that are jumping in. Then we'll be progressing towards an SMG or a drum shotgun meta, which I don't think personally is very enjoyable to watch or play, and for lack of a better word, just very unskillful as well. One of the things I am very passionate about is obviously the normal ARs being returned. The red dot gimmick has been used and tried in the past few seasons with the AUGs, with the MK7s, and obviously now the red dot sights, and I don't think it is a healthy way for Fortnite to progress, since it's a little bit too easy. Basically, at the top level, a red dot shot is just too easy to hit. We want a little bit more RNG. We want you to be a little bit more exposed. With a red dot, you basically have perfect cover most of the times, and it does just too much damage for anyone to counteract. It's a little bit too counterintuitive to have in a competitive game. So I'd love the normal AR to come back, because I think that was one of the most skillful weapons, because you had to wait for your bloom to reset. You had to stand still. You had to make investments in your mats and to put yourself in a better spot and zone. I think that's a lot more healthier than having someone with the red dot that can double dink you with first assault and put you into a bit of trouble when you haven't done anything wrong when you rotate. Last but not least, Nothing else has to be said. Best shock in the game. Let's go. And now let's go towards the last part, and probably the most interesting one that I would love to talk about is tournaments themselves. And the first point, obviously, is Siphon. Siphon needs to be returned. Obviously, if you saw my previous video, you saw how impactful Siphon is as a game mechanic. It is required in order for this game to stay competitive, and a lot of people's arguments for this is basically, hey, other video games don't have Siphon. Well, other video games aren't based on building and a lot of different mechanics where you're basically making it to a stacked endgame like that and relying on that in order for you to progress throughout the game. So I think Siphon is very necessary. It allows people to make sick plays, makes people have the ability to clutch up, which in turn makes it more fun to watch as well, which at the end of the day is the goal, because obviously this is a game that has to be broadcasted in order for it to be popular on certain ends, and if Siphon isn't there, well, that removes a lot of those possibilities. One thing I haven't seen introduced yet, and I would love to see, is the introduction of solo victory cups for specific ranks. More specifically, having solo victory cups be something of a breeding ground for lower tiered players to get their first earnings. Obviously, this was the way that Epic basically designed the solo tournaments to be this season. Solo victory cups, 7.5k people making it to the finals, including me, basically is Epic's way of showing to the casuals or like the middle tier competitive players, like, hey, you guys can be competitive and professional players too, which in turn increases interaction, lets more people play the game. It's a free $100 every single tournament pretty much, right? So I think we like that gimmick, we like that mechanic very much. Obviously, it makes the competitive scene more active, means more people playing, which means in turn better viewership, etc, etc, etc. But I think it is a bit of a gimmick mechanic to let people get the first earnings and shouldn't be considered as competitive as previous formats. So one of the ways to counteract that is having rank-specific tournaments based on that. So for platinum players, for example, and below, you'd be able to play the solo victory cups. But once you earn once, then you have to upgrade to the next cup, which is the solo cash cup for champions. Basically, would be the old way of how solo cash cups work. So basically, one round of qualification to a top 100, and then top 100 with increased pricing. So instead of $100 for winning a game in the solo victory cup for platinum players, it'd be $3,000, for example, for the champions, which in turn will make for better viewing experiences, allows, you know, those players that want to pop off in solos but are basically limited to $100 win, having an output to basically find better duos, find better placements, for example, as well. And we really see a lot of people progress and grow in the solo format, even though people look at it as skillful. I do think it is one of the best ways for a solo skilled player to come out and show off what they're capable of. And I think the best example of that was Venno back in the day. You know, got second place in solo all-star. You know, if solo all-star never existed, who knows what sort of career Venno would have had, because he wasn't able to prove himself to the rest of the world that he was a competent and tier 1 player back in the day, and able to play with Tayson after that. So I love the idea of having solo tournaments be competitive, one lobby format, 6 games, and solo victory cups don't really do that. So having best of both worlds for solo victory cups for lower tier players to get the first earnings, solo cash cups for big boys to get themselves a bigger prizing and to prove themselves, I think is the perfect mix for Fortnite tournaments. Last but not least, the zero build tournaments need to probably be at different times. I know a lot of people want to play both tournaments, and even though Epic loves to push zero build cups, you know, in the faces of everybody, if they really want to achieve what they want to achieve, is basically making zero build more popular, well, then let people actually play zero build on a different day. There's so much time in a week for tournaments to be hosted, and just for them to be forced into one weekend is just a little bit unnecessary. When you want to, you know, increase engagement, it doesn't make much sense. I feel like from Epic side, they probably want to make it that the sweats don't play the zero build cups, but at the end of the day, they just play other regions anyways, and that ruined that whole dynamic. Speaking of, region lock should probably be removed, because why? Everyone does it anyways, from what I see on Twitter. You know, their brothers, sisters, hamsters, dogs, cats, father plays the solo cash cup on NA Central, and then also plays the Middle East one, and then the EU one, and all of them. So it doesn't really matter whether or not region lock is a thing, because the people counteract it and bypass it anyway. So, and if it's not enforced, then what's the point in having it in the first place? So just that simple. But that is basically my season wish list. I think if we implement all of these things very slowly and add it to the game, I think that will be the best way for Fortnite to succeed in the future and for us to get out of this bit of a slump that it feels like. And I don't think I'm asking too much in those things. I think it's very simple, very easy, and it's basically what everybody would want. And it doesn't really affect the casual side of competitive, you know? These guys still have their metas, they still have their pubs and stuff to play with, and this just makes it a little bit more competitive for the future of the game, which is something we've been lacking a little bit in the past few months as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys on the first day of the new season. Going to be doing a complete unranked to unreal grind on that day, so look forward to that. Have yourself a good rest of your day. Goodbye.